So consequently, since the beginning of the U.S., gays have threatened these foundational aspects of our security. You can see that in, well, even before Don't Ask, Don't Tell, when it was really kind of against the law to even be gay and be a part of the military, which is part of our security for the United States. And even, then through Don't Ask, Don't Tell, it was pretty clear that, gays had threatened the military in some way, because it's the idea of homosexuality at its essence is interpreted as threatening to that strength, that manly strength of the nation. And so, of course, then gay marriage does too. So, as I said, homosexuality has always been interpreted as a security risk. And you can certainly see that clearly in the military as well. And thankfully, Don't Ask, Don't Tell has now been repealed. Well, in the process, but hopefully it's going through. Intersections of gender, sexuality, and race. So ultimately, it's now really widely accepted around the globe that the nation is a social construction. It's just something. It's not something that just organically blossomed up and became what it was because flowers grow that way, or pears, because we're constructed in these ways. So socially constructed, and discourses of nationalism and our identity are based on certain inclusions and exclusions. These can be based on gender, or race, or religion, or sexuality. All these outward status markers. According to scholar Benedict Anderson, the nation is an imagined community. Of course. I mean, look at what, even though the United States is known as somewhat being a melting pot, it used to be, of a lot of different ethnicities and different traditions and people coming from around the world, we still have the idea that the United States imagined community is somehow white, heterosexual, and Christian. And that's somehow abnormal if you're not. Even though we know it's not true, it's still, in a sense, taken to be, the core of the U.S.'s identity. So things that threaten those cores are seen clearly as a threat to the security. So then heterosexuality is clearly linked to the reproduction and longevity of the nation. And not really even just the argument that, one of the main arguments against same-sex marriage is, well, they don't have kids and we need to have marriage and maintain that one woman, one man idea of marriage because that's, so we keep having babies. Well, there's so many arguments. We got a lot of babies. Really, the world has a lot of babies. So that's one argument. The other argument is heterosexual married couples do not have to have babies. And they can get married. They might not even be able to have babies. They might choose not to have babies. It's certainly not a prerequisite for them to get married. It's, being heterosexual. So it's a pretty weak argument, but it's still one that we hear or not. But in other words, yes, the idea that marriage is definitely linked in heterosexuality to the reproduction of the nation and our norms, reproducing our norms in that sense. So heterosexuality, along with gender and race and so on, is a critical element of the reproduction of what is imagined as a secure and stable heteronormative white Christian nation. And our nation imagines its security in ways that make it dependent upon the reproduction of this hierarchical order. So our national security imaginary naturalizes heterosexuality as the only normal mode of sexual identity, sexual practice, or sexual relation, making homosexuality abnormal and a risk to the nation's security. So the research suggests, really kind of in conclusion, that marriage functions as a normalizing mechanism or tool of the nation. Okay, that of the nation to police the gender, racial, and sexual configurations of its citizenry. I didn't save my new changes. So sorry that didn't end up on a tile. I can repeat that conclusion though, or that the research suggests that marriage functions as a normalizing mechanism of the nation to police our gender and racial and sexual configurations of our citizenry. And that has functioned very well to do so. Even though marriage has shifted over time, it still works very much as a tool of the state to police those, arrangements of our citizenry. Okay, so in conclusion, the movement for gay marriage challenges traditional marriage. It clearly does. It works as a disciplinary mechanism of the state and is thus potentially destabilizing to our security and to the heteronormativity of the state. Same-sex marriage also highlights a contradiction in American national identity. Yeah, next one. On the one hand, if gay marriage is supported, then the normative status of the heterosexual nuclear family and heteronormative nation may be undermined. although the information from Massachusetts is showing that no, it's not really undermining the heteronormativity of the state. In fact, it's really working more to assimilate. That, you know, it's working as a normalizing function, marriages in Massachusetts. In fact, they, even with the backlash, they passed it again because really the people, the leaders in the decision-making positions in Massachusetts made big announcements that they never even noticed any gays were married, didn't seem to affect the state at all, didn't seem to be any problem. In fact, it functioned quite well as a normalizing mechanism and brought supposed stability in normalizing ways to those couples and to the state in Massachusetts. So, even though so they're thinking it may undermine it. But, on the other hand, if same-sex marriage is not supported, the civil rights of homosexuals are undermined. Oh, that's right, I didn't save my new slide, sorry. So, that is kind of, in a sense, that is the contradiction in American identity. However, there's that third side of it, that if marriage functions as a normalizing mechanism of the nation to police the gendered, racial, and sexual configurations of its citizenry, in other words, the state functioning to keep the order, right, then it also functions then as a tool of assimilation. And you hear that a lot for the LGBTQ community. It's that just like us argument. We're just like them, you know, just like us. So that then it wouldn't be destabilizing. But in a sense, then it functions to assimilate the LGBTQ community and it challenges, it diminishes the opportunity for the community to challenge the limitations and barriers that are inherent to a heteronormative nation. So ultimately, it's crucial to support same-sex marriage as a fundamental right to citizenship. Denying same-sex marriage is a civil rights violation. If you're a citizen, you should have the rights of citizenship. Okay, fundamentally, there's not really any choices in that. I don't know, are we already on the last slide? Like I said, all my little changes at the end didn't work very well. But ultimately, in conclusion, the research suggests that same-sex marriage is perceived as a danger to the United States, to the nation, and as such is interpreted as a threat to the national security. Imaginary. Now, ultimately, part of the larger LGBTQ community didn't support marriage because that's part of the community that sees it as a assimilating tool. Gay marriage, however, in Massachusetts did bring stability to LGBTQ couples, their families, and to Massachusetts, especially through economic stability, because it's bringing in a lot of money, a lot of revenue. The marriage business is a $40 billion a year booming industry in the United States. So, and that's one way that legalizing gay marriage will bring in a lot of money. Okay, so that's one of the parts of the argument. Also, by comparing Arizona and Massachusetts, it became quite clear that in Massachusetts they had support of all the really large and well-funded LGBTQ organizations of the state were behind it, Mass Equality being one of the larger ones, and the Human Rights Association. And they were behind it, and so they had experience from other states. Lawyers came with tons of experience. They had a lot of money, and their first legal case was a huge case with like 7 couples. In Arizona, we already had a law that you had to be one man and one woman before it started. We only had one couple push the case forward, and it wasn't being backed by Arizona Equality, or Equality Arizona, excuse me, and it wasn't backed by the Human Rights Organization or any of those because they felt like Arizona wasn't ready yet. If you push it in a state before a state is ready, then instead of it getting passed, they make all kinds of new laws like Arizona did that we didn't even have before against gay marriage, and that was kind of the result in Arizona. The time wasn't right for Arizona. Now we have laws that we didn't even have before, you know, against gay marriage in Arizona. So that was clearly one of the huge findings if you're pushing for, you know, the legalization of gay marriage. But ultimately, it's to see marriage as an institution of the state. And hopefully I'll learn to move beyond those kind of barriers and not invite the state into our most loving and rewarding and personal relationships.
Do you think gender roles play any parts in the influence or test of homosexuality?
Well, really, my whole book is based on gender roles and those ideas and those dichotomies at the beginning. So yeah, it definitely plays into it. That's what I think this scene is so threatening, all those gender divisions.
So since marriage is socially constructed, do you see marriage continuing to delegitimize certain groups of people, or do you think that society will evolve?
As long as we only let certain people get married, then it's obviously working as a tool to delegitimize other people that aren't. Even, I mean, that's an argument, a large part of the argument from the gay community is that if we legalize gay marriage, then there'll be the good gays and the bad gays, the good married gays and the bad gays, and, you know, that idea of dichotomizing them again and creating a new hierarchy in that community.
So it could, like, even if we were like, okay, gay marriage, cool, great, perfect, it would still create problems because because dichotomies are inherent in American politics, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Other questions? Everyone here is all pro same choice, or yeah?
Was there an event or was there something long ago that made you decide that you were going to take this stance? Because I know I'm around the same age group, and I'm thinking, you know, I'm very much heterosexual and very much about this thing, and it does make me uncomfortable.
Does it?
And I mean, even talking about it is uncomfortable.
Well, good for you for talking about it then. Clearly it doesn't make me uncomfortable.
Yeah, I was
Sex
just wondering, what was it that made you veer from the path?
Well, first off in my life, I've done everything different because, you know, I was not supposed to. And it just seemed to be it for me. I did, you know, I played a rock and roll band, so traveled around the country until I was 30 and then decided to go to school. So I kind of do everything backwards and challenge everything. Just kind of, that part was natural as a part of me. But also, because I got married when I was young and dumb, you know, before I knew any better. And then I got married again, just to see if it would work again. Actually, both relationships were successful. They just didn't last forever. But what I started to do was observe my life, self-reflect, observe other people's lives and relationship, look at the differences and how people got along, people that before they got married, and then what happened after they got married. And I have this great analogy: before marriage, happy; after marriage, not the same couple. It's like we're all sitting here in this room. It's all, you know, we're all happy to be here. But what if somebody walked up, closed the doors, and locked them? We'd be like, now I want out. Nothing would have changed, and that, in a sense, is what that institution does to growing, you know, nurturing relationships. Can really close the door and lock it, and give these ideas of like, now I don't have to work at it anymore. Now I can just assume that it's just going to be there forever, and it really has not been. So it was those kind of feelings, Lisa, that really made me start thinking about what is marriage and what is this institution. And then, like I said, when I started school and grad school, I took classes of queer theory, and of course, all my women's studies made me question gender dichotomies and gender roles in marriage. And so that was part of why, you know, I've been with my partner for 25 years, where I was like, you know, I don't want a husband, you know, because they don't really do much stereotypically, and I know I don't want to be a wife, because like they do everything. So I want a partner, and I want a partner in my life, and all those things. So it was those experiences, and then graduate school and queer studies and stuff that really led me to that. And then the same-sex marriage movement, really, it was like, really give me something to research for my dissertation and my book, because it was like, you can't really just talk about things theoretically. I found out the hard way, you know, through the schooling process. You really got to like look things up and have some numbers and theorize off your, you know, quantitative studies and stuff. So kind of that's kind of the story.